All About Relationships is an engaging, lighthearted, and practical show designed to help people improve their relationships in meaningful ways. Hosted by Dr. Don Allen, a certified Gottman therapist, as well as an advanced trainer for the Institute. He is also certified in emotion-focused therapy. With over 40 years of experience in the field of psychotherapy, Dr. Allen is here to provide expert guidance on strengthening marriages, parent-child relationships, friendships, and more. Through insightful discussions, audience call-ins, and guest experts, viewers receive real-world strategies to enhance intimacy, communication, and overall relationship satisfaction. So now, please welcome the host of All About Relationships, Dr. Don Allen.
And we're back. Hello, I am Dr. Don Allen. This show is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriages and loving, lasting relationships. Welcome to the show. Have a good one for you today. I have to tell you, when I came up with the idea of this show, it seems like a simple title, but it was actually harder to put this one together than a lot of them. I think I did it in a way that you're going to enjoy it and be able to have practical use with it. But like I said, it was kind of interesting to come up with and wanting to share it with you. The name of our show today is The Power of Reciprocity in Love. Okay, so reciprocity when we love someone. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? And a lot of people, I think, kind of see it on the surface, but there's a lot of backstory to this one. There's a lot of layers to this one that I think is very important to a relationship. I mean, important enough that I want to share it with you today. So that's what we're going to look at, okay? So I always say, what have I done for my relationship today? Well, you're doing it now. You're looking at this show and you're hopefully excited to watch this and take some of the things you're learning to your special person. And, ideally what I'd like is for you to watch this show and then go back and watch it again with them where you can stop it and slow down. I always like to put my information up because I love information from you all. It helps me not only plan future shows, but use your information maybe from the mailbag or just have good questions I can keep in mind when I go ahead and do my show. So like I said, what's nice about this is you can go back, freeze frame it, and get information. But I do welcome comments from all of you. Remember, the show is about education. It's not psychotherapy. It's designed to be light and fun and good news that you can actually apply in your relationships. And if you've been watching my show regularly or ongoing, I'm sure you know that this has been something that has been very utile and very valuable with your partner. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. I always put some questions in there to get us going and to say, all right, what are we going to talk about today and why is this interesting? So here's my questions. When you hear the word reciprocity, do you think love or do you think trade? Like I do this, you do that. We're going to trade for it, see? Is your relationship generous, or do you find in your relationship that people keep score? I did this, so I should get that. Is it about keeping score? Next question with reciprocity. Are you giving freely or quietly waiting to get something back? The other question, I always like to liken this to the Gottman Institute because it's our most solid researched understanding of couples in relationship and marriages. So one of the things I put here is do masters marriages, which is what John and Julie call the ones that really do it super well. And by extension, master marriages are master special people, right? It doesn't have to be the institute of marriage, just that loving relationship that you have. So do masters marriages think, when they think reciprocity, about their person? Right? So what have I done? Where does that go back and forth? So masters marriages really have that sense of looking out for their partner and wanting to understand what's going on with them so that they're able to love and enhance them and their relationship, right? So just asking, do you do that? Do you do that? Is that something that, yeah, Don, we do it all the time. So how does reciprocity fit into fondness and admiration? Right? How does that work? On the relationship house, in the friendship part of the house, the lower three, the biggest one right in there is that fondness and admiration. So how does reciprocity fit in? We're going to talk about that, right? So again, back to kind of thinking about this. Is reciprocity designed for self-gain, or is it a mission statement to honor our partner but honor ourselves at the same time? One of the things I'm talking about here with reciprocity is not to forsake yourself. The problem is if you do that, you're going to eventually start getting kind of resentful, and it's going to take the air out of the balloon. So we don't want to do that. So remember, in my show, always safety first. Your relationships. Um, Another thing I like to do with my show, if you've been watching, you'll know this, is one of my goals is to think, is what am I saying or what am I talking about? Is that true 2,000 years ago? And will it probably be true 2,000 years from now? Will that be true? Because I don't want to stay on fads. I don't want to stay in politics, especially. I don't want to get into different things related to the trendy stuff, right? You can get plenty of that on the media if you want it. This show is really designed to be classic. Classic meaning this will work for you and you should be able to keep this ongoing throughout your life. Okay. Remember the Gottman Institute, we always seek to understand before we seek to fix. And with reciprocity, one of the things we're going to seek to do today is to understand your reciprocity in your relationships. So we're going to talk about that. So in the discussion section, all right. So reciprocity can be both good and bad, right? This isn't something that's always good. For example, sometimes reciprocity can be done as a form of manipulation. Doesn't have to be sinister. If you've ever gone to a grocery store and they're offering a cracker that you might try, or they're offering a piece of sausage that you might try, their hope is to say, well, I did something nice for you, buy my product. Well, that's reciprocity. But it kind of comes with, I don't know, is this done for good or bad? I notice, especially now when I go to a lot of the restaurants, they have these little machines, and you pay for your restaurant bill right there. But the person's watching over you when that thing comes up to see, are you going to tip them 10, 15, 20%, 25%? And they're watching you. So again, there's reciprocity there. I was a good waiter, so what are you going to do for me? So it's the pressure of that thing that I don't especially care for, although I usually always tip 20%, just because it's not just my waiter, it's everybody in the whole building that profits from that and needs to. I mean, they don't pay these people a lot of times. Um, but one of the things that can happen in our own mind, because one thing you're going to notice with reciprocity today is I'm really talking to you about, you first. I want you to look at your way of thinking about reciprocity before we can even get to the next part. Okay. So if you feel or believe that you're always the one reaching out, I'm always the one doing this, I'm not getting what I need to get, that's negative sentiment override in the relationship house, right? It's that leading with the negative and looking for the negative. That's a warning sign. We don't want that. You might feel that you're always giving but never receiving. Or in the back of your mind, what if you're sitting there saying, I always got to look out for number one, got to take care of myself here because nobody else is going to take care of me. I'm going to take care of myself. That's not really reciprocity, right? So even then, if you're doing something, is if your bottom line is I'm watching out for me, it's probably going to block the love, and it's probably going to be noticed interactionally in the relationship. Okay. So one of the things we're going to look at today is, are you vigilant towards your partner's needs and changing needs? Think about the first of the year. Okay, what changes have happened in your life that have caused you to have changing needs or wants? Oh, very important, very important. So these things aren't static. Just because you did something 10 years ago doesn't mean that you love and do it just as much today. So you have to talk with your partner. You have to even talk with yourself about what's going on inside of you. The other thing you're doing is constantly watching your partner to see how it's changing without them even telling you. That's reaching for your partner. So let me talk a little bit generally about the philosophy of reciprocity. So one of the things I did was I looked up things. I love to look at chat GPT and those kind of things because they can give me citations that I want really quick. So one of the things I looked up is a proverb I heard when I was 28 years old, and it said, "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in." Okay. So it is, so in other words, the true meaning of life is to plant trees under whose shade you don't expect to sit. In other words, I'm doing something good. And when I'm not here, somebody else is going to benefit for that. And they won't even know I planted that tree. The reason I said I know I was 28 years old is I was working at Jewish Family Service in Cleveland, and they had, fundraisers and different cool things you could do to help the community. And one of the things that I did was I bought trees to be planted in Israel. I thought it was really cool because I think, again, planting trees, I think is generally always a good idea. And I've never been there. And you know what? I planted those when I was 28. So that was like 6 million years ago. And I bet those trees are pretty big. I bet you, I bet you they're big, and I bet people are enjoying their shade. But that's reciprocity, because there's things that's happening in this world today that somebody did to be nice for me that I'm enjoying that I don't even know them. But it's that idea, it's the spirit of that. It's very important, not just with your partner, but in general. And one of the things I find with that, and I'm not a medical doctor, but I think you live longer. If I'm driving down the road and I'm in a lane and somebody wants to get into my lane, I might say, "Hey, that's my lane. That's my lane. You can't be in that lane. I'm here. I'm here. You can't have that lane." I can do that. But you know what? That causes my body to stress. I don't need that stress. And the other thing, too, is the person really needs to come in. And then maybe when I need to come in, reciprocally, somebody will be kind and let me get into that lane. Yield to win, right? So I looked up some other things about that too. One of the words I like with reciprocity is the term altruism. Now, in my field, there are things called defense mechanisms of the ego. That's a fancy Freud term, but we all know one probably with alcoholism and denial, right? And denial, the thoughts are present, but the feelings are absent. So that's a defense mechanism that happens oftentimes when people are in the throes of addiction that keeps them, addicted, you see. But one of the healthiest uh, coping mechanisms humans have, one of the most positive in the mature coping mechanisms department, is something called altruism. So I went back and looked at my old book. This was a book from 1977. I actually used this a lot in my dissertation. But a guy by the name of George Valiant wrote a book called Adaptation of Life. And he defines altruism as vicarious but constructive and instinctual gratifying service to others. So vicarious, just for the joy of, right? But constructive, doing something well thought through, and instinctually gratifying. The biggest thing I think of when I think of altruism and I watch television is sometimes, somebody we really love and cherish will, let's say, pass away from cancer. Well, we can't stop that. But what we can do is give money to the Cancer Institute. I personally like to give money to St. Jude's, and my mother was really big on St. Jude's. So I continue her legacy and loving reciprocity to my mother, although she's passed, by continuing to support her cause and in turn do something altruistic for kids that are struggling and suffering. So reciprocity can involve that high functioning way um, of being altruistic. Okay. So altruism also, works towards empathy, not knowing what somebody is experiencing, but really wanting to learn and really wanting to care about that. Right. It also looks at things like, the elevation of joy and experience. When I talk in my third segment today, I'll give you an example with my cat. But I think cats and dogs are really great for teaching us how to be reciprocally loving and kind to our partner. We just seem to do it better with our animals, right? Another one that I really want to talk about, and I've mentioned in previous shows, is M. Scott Peck. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. And this is an old book now, but I encourage you to read it. It's still, again, very, very relevant. And it would have been relevant 2,000 years ago, and it's probably going to be relevant 2,000 years from now. But he was talking about the construct of love. And what he says is love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth, right? So think about it. Let's say we take care of somebody's physical needs. Okay, that helps them feel seen, soothed, safe, secure. That's spiritual, right? So it goes back to that foundation, right? So he clarifies that love is not merely a feeling, but an additional action, a conscious decision to act, often regardless of emotions, right? So let's say, it's 3 in the morning, you have a baby, the baby's crying, it's cold in your house. You walk over to the baby, you step on a squeak toy. It's not fun. You don't like being up, but you really want to make sure the baby's fine and the blankets are still on the baby, and maybe you need to change the diaper. That stuff doesn't feel good, but it's love. That's where that's at. And it's reciprocity. One of the things that we're doing is what our parents did for us, right? So back to the trees. So that's what we're talking about when we think about this idea of reciprocity. And you notice that I put this all together before we really start getting into some of the other parts. Let's go ahead and break. We're going to go to the mailbag next, and let's enjoy a couple commercials first. I'll see you in a minute.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
All right, and we are back. So we're going to do some mailbag questions, which I'm really excited about. That some good ones today. I want to add a little bit before I start that. One, remember in John and Julie Gottman's research I talked about earlier, what they did was they looked at the history of marriage therapy. And one of the things that was happening in the 60s that was really big in terms of therapists helping couples is they would do something called helping them understand quid pro quo. So, in other words, everybody has roles in the family. So, I'm going to be outside mowing the grass, and you're going to be inside vacuuming, let's say, those types of things. So, they would talk about the roles in the family and they would have expectations about it. What they found was in the research with Gottman's is that built resentment. It was called quid pro quo, this for that. And hey, I did my stuff. Why am I not getting what I want? So we want to be careful with that. It looks like reciprocity, but it isn't because there's expectations of the other person, and we have a better way of doing it. Okay. So the problem with that is the underlying motive was personal gain. So when you think about it, you want to approach would you want to approach reciprocity with the idea of fondness and admiration for your partner. And I'm adding the idea of loyalty, respect, reciprocity, and really adoration. All of these things you're doing because you really love your partner and you want to do great things. I always think the best way to look at that is when you talked about grandparents. If you ever talk to a person with grandkids, a lot of times the phone's coming out and they're showing you pictures of their grandkids. I love it. I think it's amazing. But boy, you listen to the fondness and admiration when you hear that, and you hear how much they adore their their grandchildren. That's what I want to say. I want us to do that for our special person. Okay. So let's look at some questions from the mailbag. All right, this first one. I feel like I'm putting a lot into the relationship. Okay. And I want more sex. I'll put in more work doing things around the house, but my spouse doesn't seem to take the hint or even respond. Why isn't that coming back to me? Okay. Well, check my prior shows because I talked about what goes into good sex in one of my prior episodes. So I'll cite that one. But really, one of the things that I think is happening here that could be better is one, the communication of needs and wants, right? The other thing is tuning into your partner so that you both are doing things in a way that supports that love and caring relationship, the cuddling, the fondness, the giving kisses on the back of the neck, saying how your partner is just special and wonderful just because they're who they are. Those things probably go along towards a better conversation about sex and then having some of those things realized mutually in the bedroom, not just one person wanting that, but both people wanting that. So that's one of the things I would say with that. I like the idea of reciprocity, but you hear the underlying idea that I want something back. That's not the kind of reciprocity we're looking for. Okay, question number 2. My partner says I don't appreciate them, but I feel like I do a lot for them already. Why doesn't it seem to matter to them? Well, one of the things that you're noticing here is that idea that it's not getting talked about, right? And one of the things that you hear that can happen in this is people saying what they don't get or what they don't have or what they don't want. I want you to shift. I want you to pivot on that. And I want you to talk about, hey, when this happens, it makes me feel this. What I really need from you is this. Do you think that's possible? What do you think? So that sentence phrasing can really talk about this idea of needs and wants, right? We talked last week, I think it was last week, about this idea of these silent fears, right? Again, not talking, imagining, worrying, not involving our partner. All right. So the next one, question 3. I've started pulling back because I wasn't getting much in return. Now I think we're distant. I don't know how to restart things. This is really the third section of my show today. We're going to talk about not only how to build that, but to keep it going. So I'm going to give you some good tips on that, right? But one of the things that I would definitely say in general with this one is that you notice the pulling back. But what also happens a lot of times when people pull back is they start thinking, it starts spinning, right? You start worrying about things and having thought monsters about things. One thing I like in a master's marriage is people can really take whatever it is to their partner, and they can be that way in a vulnerable way, and they can say what they need. Very, very important, because that's where this needs to start. And, by extension, if you have those 86% successful bids for connection, hey, honey, I'm home. Hey, I'm upstairs. Come in and tell me your day. Those kind of relationship questions where both people really feel that their partner really can't wait to see them, those things are going to go a long, long way to breaking up some of those thought monsters and being in the here and now and spontaneous and being able to share what we need. So there's something to think about. Okay, let's see if I have. Yeah, I've got one more. My partner is always on the phone. Well, we had a show on this, didn't we? My partner is always on the phone, and I feel like I'm competing for attention. Am I overreacting? Well, first off, feelings are feelings. So if you're feeling like I'm anxious, right, you're not overreacting to that. But again, how do you convey that to your partner? Now, partners, if somebody comes up to you and says that, reciprocity, don't get defensive. That's one of the four horsemen, right? We don't want to get defensive. The other thing is, if you feel defensive, you might want to think about what it means when somebody's distracting you from your phone. Because if that's happening, chances are the bids in the relationship are going more and more towards outside things. In this case, the phone, right? And again, look, I think we all kind of do that in this day and age. And you notice how I really don't fault people for things, but we can drift into it. And we look up and all of a sudden we have problems with it. So if your partner's coming to you with an idea of, hey, I really need to spend more time with you, and I notice sometimes media is getting in our way. Did you notice how I didn't use horseman? Let me use horseman. Hey, you're always on that stupid phone and you never talk to me. That's criticism, right? And that usually gets the defensiveness. So we don't want that. So the way I worded it was both hands open. Hey, I'm noticing, and I really need and want to spend more time with you. I think sometimes media is happening. What do you think? So always seek to understand before you seek to fix. So these are things that can really work and really help your relationship when you start to build this connection and reciprocity. The other thing that I'm noticing with this stuff is a lot of times when people are saying, yeah, Don, I think this reciprocity might be an issue, they probably drifted a while. It's probably been going on for a while, just not addressed. So always go back to the friendship house, always go back to build those connections. One thing I'll talk about in the third section is that, this idea of always have a date night. The other concept I would give you is you don't have to stay in the conflict house all the time. People, when they start going way below that 5 minutes to positive to 1 minute to negative, what begins to happen is that negative sentiment happens. I'm anticipating a problem. And then, oh my gosh, we're always in conflict. We always have fighting. Probably isn't always, but that's the way people sometimes think. So it starts to build in this thing, we're not doing anything right. And then if you push on it strong enough, we can start looking outside the relationship for relief from that. So maybe we're on our video games more. Maybe we're staying extra late to play our sport, or let's say we're just staying late at work. So we don't want to drift into that. We don't want to drift. So, with the questions that we're having today, it involves slowing down in the here and now and just having a good, loving discussion about what do we want. Doesn't have to go to a conflict house. It can just be, hey, we need to maybe take some more time to make more bids for each other. Yeah, okay, I can do that. And that's reciprocal, right? But the other side of it is, hey, when we do this, what do you need in the relationship? Remember what I said earlier, being attentive to what our partner likes and wants and needs. What would you like to do? Right? Well, I'd like to look on television and find a series we can watch, 10 episodes for. Hey, why don't we look together and see something that would be mutually interesting to us? Another secret to that is watch a regular movie, but cut it into segments. So if it's a 2-hour movie, only watch a half hour a night so you can't wait to get back to it. Some of those things can be really fun and connecting. It's media. But if I'm doing that and the other person's off on a different device doing something else, I may not feel like we're watching it together, right? So again, that reciprocity of watching the movie together feeds itself. So really, really, really important stuff. So, all right. So I tell you what, this is probably a good time to stop. I have a little bit more for the third segment. So why don't we go ahead and break a little bit early, take a couple minutes with that, and I will be back and talk about practical tips towards building reciprocity.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness: Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
All right, we're back. We're back. This particular segment is called The Power of Reciprocity in Love. I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationship, working towards ideal marriage and loving, lasting relationships. So, we're going to talk about the power of reciprocity and how to do it now. This is our third segment. So, the first thing I'm going to say is it starts with you. And what I mean by that is kind of what's your values, what's your beliefs, what's your ethics when it comes to being connected and reciprocal with your partner. Okay. So, what is that? The meaning of being reciprocal. Where does that start? Okay. So, I try to put things into context. And one of the things I notice about a lot of people is they love their pets. Now, for those of you who don't like pets, my apologies, but try to stay with me. One of the things I notice is this morning I was brushing my cat. Now, my cat, you've seen him on the air, and he'll come in and he'll sit on my little table here. And when he does that, I brush him. And he really just sits. And I think he kind of knows, hey, if I go in there, I can get brushed. But why did I brush him? What was that about? Why was I doing that? Was it for me? Right? So what I noticed as I did that, because I'm thinking of you all today, is I found it was reciprocal. Reciprocity. It was reciprocal. He really likes being brushed, it seems. And I really like taking care of his coat because it's really healthy for him. Now, he probably doesn't know anything about a healthy coat, but I just find that he's healthier if I brush him and he feels better. And I enjoy petting him. I enjoy the feel of that fur and all of that. So that's kind of for me. But now during the brushing, what I noticed is he purred. He made a purring sound, which generally means he likes it. And then what he did was he kind of rolled over on his back and he looked at me and he slowly blinked at me like that. Now, what I understand from people who study cats is a slow blink is kind of like a kiss or a bid for connection. So here we are. He's not saying anything because he's a cat, but that nonverbal stuff coming back at me is making me feel like I want to pet him more. And the more I want to pet him, the more he wants to let me know he approves of it. That's reciprocity. Okay. So we connect in a way that's mutually beneficial. But my primary reason for doing all that was for his well-being. That's what love is. I read the Scott Peck thing. That's what it is. It's a decision to really make sure I take care of my cats in a loving way. And they reciprocate by being happy, I guess I would say. Um, I'm thinking too, I haven't done it yet, but I'm thinking of getting cat pet insurance because vet costs nowadays I'm noticing have been rising. So if I do get pet insurance, he won't even notice I did that. He may not even he may not like going to the vet. But again, doing all of that is part of the reciprocity of caring for an animal. I notice a lot of times that's what they sell on pet food commercials. is they really show people loving their pet and caring for their pet and wanting to give them the best. So, pets a lot of times become part of our family. So we want to do reciprocity. It's easy with animals. It should be easy with our partners, but sometimes we kind of fall short with that, right? So even like with work, there were jobs that I've had in my lifetime when, I would really work hard for the company because I really appreciated my job and I really appreciated all the things my job did for me. But I also noticed that, when I came in for reviews and when I did, talk to people that were, in charge, that they did appreciate me and try to advance my career. And they would try to bring in people that would help me understand things, kind of like we're doing right now, to really make me a better clinician, right? So that's reciprocity. But I will tell you, people will describe having a job that people are leaving so fast you don't know who to give your letter of resignation to. And when you look at the reciprocity, you have to ask yourself, well, what about morale? Well, what is the interest in supporting the company? What is the interest in getting supported back by the company? So you can see where, in a bad context, where sometimes reciprocity can collapse and why it's so important we're talking about it today, right? But what you want to do is really show respect, appreciation, loyalty with people like, your pets or your grandkids or your kids, and particularly, your special person, your marriage. You want to really show that adoration that, oh my gosh, I can't think of a better person on the planet than you. And I want to let you know that. And I want to really let you hear that every day, you see. So very, very important stuff. So yes, we're wanting to look at that. Now, from a Gottman perspective, the research, one thing we have to have for reciprocity is try to approximate 86% of the time when you give a bid, they receive it and are happy to receive it and give it back to you, and then vice versa. What Sue Johnson's research calls within between, within between. You just keep going back and forth and making that happen. I used my cat because it was a great, easy example. The more I petted him, the more he purred. So the more he purred, the more I brushed him. You hear it. You hear the reciprocity. That's what I'm trying to convey here, right? The other thing that's so important with reciprocity is the world moves under our feet. You really have to be a study of this. What's interesting now may not be interesting later. You see what I'm saying? What you have to do in January may be very different than what you have to do in May. So there's a lot of things that go on and things change in life. Sometimes they have these things that's in my field, it's a fancy word called second order change. But let's say, your last one is graduating from high school and they're moving on, they're going to go do something and they're going to live in another town or they're going to go to a college or something. But all of a sudden, the silence is deafening in the house because the kids aren't there anymore. So you have to kind of readjust, reacquaint your world and your life to that changing time. It can be a wonderful time and it can be a transition with your kids that's wonderful. But you probably need to talk to your kids about reciprocity. For example, hey, why don't we do a Sunday evening check-in call while you're at college? It doesn't have to be long, but just let's talk. I can hear your voice. You can hear mine. You can tell me what's interesting. I can tell you what's going on at home. That's reciprocity. Right. So, how do we change to a new normal? What is a new love map? Knowing our partner's internal world. Those require conversations and they require check ins. But the other thing it gets back to is my core question about values, beliefs, ethics. What's your meaning behind taking care of your loved one? What does it mean to be there for them? Because believe me, it's not always 50-50. There are times when you're going to do things to really support your partner's goals or dreams. And sometimes that's going to cost money and you're working hard so that you can afford it, right? That's reciprocity. But the other side of it is, does a person get that and appreciate it and come back to you? And are they talking to you in ways that they let you know how much they love you and how much they appreciate you? Because if everything's just about doing it and it doesn't come back, that can build resentment. It's not quid pro quo. It's not, hey, you didn't do for me. But the bids are going outside of the relationship house. And when that happens enough, people notice it. Okay. And they should notice it because it's in the hardwiring of our being to be bonded in a loving, connecting relationship with our person. Has to be. And if it's not happening, people can, start to have trouble with that, right? So we got to watch that. Okay. So that's one of the reasons I say you really need to make sure that you have a date night. And you really need to make sure that you stay out of the conflict house sometimes. You don't want to always be in conflict. If you are, it's probably negative sentiment override where you're looking for the bad. But the other side of it is hey, yeah, we need to have conflict, necessary. But we also need to put it aside and go watch a good movie or go bowling or go do something where we're just out and having fun, especially in the spring, folks. It's getting nice. It's getting nice out there. Okay. So we need to do that. So you need to make those date nights, regardless of how busy you are. Okay. And you need to be doing things for the sheer joy of doing it for your partner. Back to my cat. I don't do that necessarily because he's purring. I do that because I want to be nice to my cat. I like him. I call that care and feeding of your person. And it just really, really is important. You need to catch your partner doing it right. You need to let them know with adjectives. For example, can you tell your partner, hey, the other day I noticed you were really funny? Or, hey, you know what? The other day you were talking to somebody and I just noticed how interesting it was to listen to you talk. That was so fun. And hey, by the way, you did something the other day. I just thought that that's a great example of how smart you are. Just how quick you could do that thing. I was just marveling at it. You're just exceptional. People need to hear that, especially from their partner. We do that all the time for our little kids. They come back from kindergarten. We always tell them how great they are. We always tell them what they did that was amazing, right? And some of that's more flattery than it is praise, but kids need to hear they're rock stars, and so do our people. Okay. The other thing too is I talk about different kind of things, but short-term and long-term goals. What's happening this month is right now. But you should be planning for the next 3 months. What's spring going to look like? What are you interested in? What are you doing? Right? I like to get involved in things together. My wife and I right now are doing some fun things about exercise together. And I just think it's really fun to be doing that, but it's even more fun because we're doing it together. And I just really, really like that. But the other thing too is keep in mind, hey, when you're 80 years old, what do you want to say about your life? What do you want to say was happening in your life? Now, when you're 80, I fully expect you to make more plans. I don't expect you to just cross the finish line. 80 isn't a time necessarily to do that. But I always like to say that metaphorically. What do you think you want to say about the first 80 years of your life when you're 80? Ask your partner, have them ask you, just talk about it. One thing I find is if you don't do that and you get to 80, you might have missed some things because you didn't plan it. Okay. So just very important. Next thing, these things, and you've noticed I've said this a lot, but it requires weekly check-ins. And people usually, what I'll hear from people is, hey, we need to do a check-in. Again, back to that internal clock and internal message for you. You need to have check-ins. You need to talk about how things are going. And you need to be able to be safe to say what you need. Don't use horsemen. If every time you get together for a meeting, all you do is criticize and complain and have contempt, boy, I'd want to avoid that too. That's not what I'm asking. But what I'm saying is, hey, one of the things I'm noticing is we probably could do better with this. What do you think? And really have a conversation about that. That can be a complaint, but I don't mind complaining. Now, if you do it 4 or 5 times in a row, I'm going to call it a criticism. But if hey, I really wished we had walked more this week. What do you think? That's not saying, hey, you never walk with me. That one's a criticism. So you want to be able to talk in a way that both of you look forward to that meeting. And if you're not, it requires a conversation. So, all right, real quick, and then we're going to go to the last segment, which is our fun thing to do for the week. I do want to talk a little bit about the bad and the ugly. Lack of reciprocity creates lack of self-soothing. So all of a sudden now phones, alcohol, comparing, those things can begin to become the order of the day. And we don't want to drift to parallel lives. Okay. So we don't want to stop those turn towards. And a lot of times, and I've talked about this on past shows, that can be an example of pain. So we're going to come back. We're going to do that fun thing we always do. I love it when you come back and tell me how it went. But yeah, let's make sure we get together with our partner, talk about this, and build some reciprocity. We'll catch you after commercial break.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom, as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Okay, we're back and can't wait to talk about the fun thing we're going to do for this week. So remember, you've watched this show. I encourage you to sit down and watch it with your person. Stop it when you're talking in the middle of it. Just freeze the frame and, talk about what I just said. What do you think about that? Do you think that's something we do? What do you think about that question from the mailbag? Is that us? That's what I want. So remember, it's to seek to understand, not to seek to get our way or persuade. Okay, that's not what we're doing. We want to yield to win. What that means is we concede certain things in our life for the bigger glory. I mentioned to you early, when we drive home and we do the speed limit and we let people get into a lane because they want to switch lanes, and we're not road raging, and we're making sure everybody gets home safely, right? That's yielding to win. That's yielding to win, and to assume the best about the people on the road, not the worst. Believe me, you're going to see people that it's hard to say it's not the worst, but you don't have to dwell on that. And very quickly, you're down the road and talking about something else that's going on the road, right? So we're going to talk about our fun thing to do. So this is our fun exercise for the week. Plan a brief meeting. There's that meeting word again. And I mean just about 15 minutes, maybe a half an hour if you get going real good. I'm not talking about a long meeting. That's an important thing to say. But answer the following question. Here it is. Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel appreciated? So the answer to that, the way you would answer that, do you feel appreciated, honey, is I'm going to give it to you. I feel appreciated when you, and then fill in the blank. I feel appreciated when you do all those little things in the house that really make the house clean. I would feel more reciprocity maybe if you helped me, because it's springtime, clean out the patio deck, and maybe we could sweep. It won't take long, but maybe we could do it together. That would be something that would be fun for me, and I would really enjoy doing it with you. What do you think? So that's that fill in the blank. So I feel appreciated when you do this. I would feel more reciprocity if we did this. Notice, and very important, no horsemen. Horsemen are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, which is calling your partner defective, and stonewalling, which is just to blow your partner off and not talk to them at all. So if you notice, do you feel appreciated? Well, I'll tell you what I don't feel. And you do this all the time, and that really drives me nuts. Those are all horsemen. Those are hard. Just keep those out. You have a 96% chance of that turning into a fight if you use those. Don't do it. And that's science. That's predictive. We know that. So don't use horsemen. Oh my gosh. Okay. At the end of the meeting, when you do this meeting, have an agreement that each day for a little bit, not a lot. I don't want a lot. If you're going to do a lot, go hog wild. But if you don't, just a little bit, um, purely for the sake of the other. So you're each day, both of you, purely for the sake of the other person, do something nice that the other one notices and gives appreciation for. But see, again, this is what I mean as it starts with you. It's both hands open. It's I'm doing it for the love of you. I mentioned with my cat because it's easy. It's easy. But that's what I'm talking about. Just the idea of I'm doing it for the joy of making your life better. Okay. So back to what I said about the trees, planting the trees, right? Doing things without expecting something to happen back, or doing something that somebody's going to enjoy and they didn't even know that you were responsible for it. What happens with that is synergy. Synergy is when you both are feeling it go back and forth and back and forth, what Sue Johnson calls within between in a positive way. Back to my cat. The more I brushed him, the more he purred, the more he purred, the more I wanted to do things that help him feel more comfortable, which made him roll on his back, et cetera, et cetera. So the other thing too is do it with enthusiasm and love for your partner. Just want to rekindle what I had said earlier about this concept of altruism, doing things for the good of doing good, even if something's happened that's not good. I mentioned earlier, somebody doesn't survive cancer. So what do? We make donations to a cause that helps that go away. We can't solve it. It didn't help with this person, but by golly, maybe the next person it will. And rather than get mad and bitter and all that, we're going to do something loving and caring. That's altruism, right? And that's reciprocity, giving back, even though things are going to happen in life that aren't what we want. Okay. So just very, very important with that. So the other thing I'm going to say, just as before I end, is when you do this for me and you're enjoying that, ask yourself after your meeting, if you did it right, how do you feel? Because chances are something's going to happen really wonderful. You're going to feel the synergy. You're going to feel connected to your partner. Your body is going to get more calm. You're going to get more relaxed. And in that relaxation, probably your body is going to repair itself. So you're going to increase your immune system probably. You're probably going to be much more likely to have healthier interactions with people, and your body is probably not going to get sick as much. Okay. So these are things that help you too in the long run, but it also helps your partner stay healthy. And that's one of the things you really want, because I know one of the things that happens when we love people is we never want them to get sick or hurt. That's reciprocity. All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end here. Yes, we are. So I just want to say I'm Dr. Don Allen. This is all about relationships, working towards ideal marriage, loving, lasting relationships. I really appreciate you coming to see me. Please tell others about me. Make sure you click like and subscription on my website. And like I said, I always welcome comments from you all. It'll help me build better shows. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And thank you very much for joining. We'll see you then.
While All About Relationships is educational and entertaining, it is not a substitute for therapy, counseling, or professional advice, but an informative space for learning and growth. So tune in each week for an engaging and reliable approach to your relationships, ensuring viewers with practical tools to create deeper connections in their daily lives. Whether tackling conflict resolution, emotional intimacy, or family dynamics, this show is your go-to resource for anyone looking to foster healthier, happier relationships in a supportive and lighthearted environment. Every Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern.